Imagine this. In the shadowed underbelly of a crumbling village where tradition clings like vines to ancient stones, a young woman's fate is sealed not by destiny, but by the cold calculus of desperation. Her name is Elara, and her story begins with betrayal that echoes through the ages, a tale of loss, redemption, and the unexpected bloom of love in the most barren of soils. But hold on, because what unfolds next will challenge everything you thought you knew about family, fortune, and the human heart. Elara grew up in the dusty lanes of Eldoria, a forgotten hamlet nestled in the foothills of mist-shrouded mountains. Her family, once proud farmers, had fallen on hard times after seasons of relentless drought turned their fertile lands into cracked wastelands. Elara was the eldest daughter, beautiful in a quiet, ethereal way, with eyes like polished obsidian and hair that cascaded like midnight silk. But beauty alone couldn't feed a family, and in Eldoria, a woman's worth was measured by the children she could bear. At 25, Elara had been married off to a local merchant's son, a match arranged with precision of a business deal. Yet, after 2 years of whispered hopes and silent disappointments, no child came. Whispers turned to accusations, Barren. They called her, a word that stung like a whip. Her husband, under pressure from his own kin, divorced her in a public ceremony that left her humiliated, stripped of her dignity, and cast back to her parents' doorstep like discarded goods. Her parents, burdened by debt and the shame of a useless daughter, saw no other path. In the dead of night, under the cover of a moonless sky, they struck a deal with a shadowy trader known only as the broker. He dealt not in spices or silks, but in lives, women sold into servitude, marriages a convenience, or worse, to distant lands where questions were few and fortunes were made on misfortune. For a pouch of gold that barely covered their arrears, Elara was handed over, her protests drowned in the broker's indifferent gaze. Bound and blindfolded, she was transported across endless roads, her mind a whirlwind of fear and fury. Days blurred into nights until she arrived at the opulent gates of a sprawling estate in the heart of a glittering metropolis. This was no ordinary auction. It was a discreet gathering for the elite, where the wealthy selected companions not for love, but for utility. Elara stood on a marble platform, her simple village dress a stark contrast to the lavish gowns of others, her spirit unbroken, but her hope flickering like a dying flame. Among the bidders was Victor Hawthorne, a name that commanded boardrooms and bent economies to his will. At 45, he was a billionaire recluse, his fortune built on tech empires that spanned continents. But wealth couldn't mend the void left by his late wife, who had passed 5 years earlier in a tragic accident, leaving him with 5 children, ranging from precocious toddler to a rebellious teenager. Victor's days were a blur of nannies and negotiations, his nights haunted by loneliness. He sought not a lover, but a mother figure, someone to bring warmth to his cold mansion without the complications of romance. His eyes, sharp and discerning, landed on Elara. Unlike the others who preened and posed, she stood with quiet defiance, her gaze meeting his without flinching. There was something in her, a resilience forged in hardship, that resonated with his own hidden scars. When the bidding began, Victor's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. 1 million, he declared, a sum that silenced the room. The broker's eyes widened. It was more than he'd ever fetched for a single soul. Elara was whisked away to Victor's estate, a palatial wonder of glass and steel overlooking the city lights. She expected chains or cruelty, but found instead a world of guarded luxury. Victor greeted her in his study, a room lined with books and artifacts from forgotten civilizations. "I didn't buy you for the reasons you think," he said, his voice low and measured. "My children need stability. You have a strength they can learn from. In return, you'll have freedom here, education, comfort, whatever you desire. But understand, this is no fairy tale. It's a contract." At first, Elara resisted, her heart a fortress against the stranger's world. The children were a whirlwind. Little Mia, the youngest of 4, with her wide-eyed curiosity, twins Alex and Zoe, 8-year-olds full of mischief, 12-year-old Liam, skeptical and sharp-tongued, and 15-year-old Sophia, whose teenage angst masked a deep grief for her mother. They tested Elara at every turn, spilled paints, hidden toys, defiant stares. But Elara, drawing from her own losses, approached them not with force, but with stories from her village, Tales of stars that guided lost travelers and rivers that whispered secrets. Slowly, cracks appeared in the walls. Mia clung to her during thunderstorms, finding solace in Elara's soothing songs. The twins laughed at her improvised games in the vast gardens. Liam opened up about his fears of failing his father's expectations, and Sophia shared hidden sketches of her dreams. Victor watched from afar, his stern facade softening as he saw his home transform from a silent tomb into a place of tentative joy. But shadows lingered. Whispers from Eldoria reached Elara through a smuggled letter. Her parents had squandered the gold, and the village elders demanded more, threatening to expose the deal. Meanwhile, Victor's business rivals circled, sensing vulnerability in his newfound distraction. One evening, as Elara tucked me into bed, the child murmured, "Are you going to be our mommy forever?" Elara's heart ached. She wasn't barren in spirit, but could she truly belong here? That night, Victor found her on the balcony, staring at the city below. "You've changed everything," he admitted, his usual composure cracking. "I thought I was saving you, but perhaps it's the other way around." Their hands brushed, a spark igniting unspoken possibilities. Yet, as they leaned closer, an urgent knock echoed through the halls, a messenger with news that would upend it all. Victor's face paled as he read the note. His company's empire was under attack, and the assailants had ties to the broker who had sold Elara. Betrayal wove its web tighter, and Elara realized her past wasn't buried. It was the key to their future survival. As sirens wailed in the distance, she turned to Victor and said, "Tell me everything. We're in this together now." He nodded, pulling her into the study where maps and files sprawled across the desk, revealing a conspiracy that stretched from her humble village to the pinnacles of power. Together, they began to unravel the threads, but just as they uncovered the first clue, a hidden account linked to her parents. An explosion rocked the estate's gates, shattering the night with fire and chaos. Elara grabbed a nearby artifact, an ancient dagger from Victor's collection, her village instincts kicking in as intruders breached the perimeter. Victor shielded her, his voice urgent. "We have to protect the children. Follow me." Victor's hand clamped around Elara's wrist as the first wave of armed men in matte black tactical gear spilled to the smoking breach in the outer wall. The estate's floodlights snapped on, bathing the manicured lawn in harsh white, turning the intruders into silhouettes that moved like wolves. Gunfire cracked, short, disciplined bursts from the security team holding the east wing. Victor pulled her down the servants' corridor, the dagger still in her fist, catching the strobing emergency lights like a shard of star. "They're not here for ransom," he hissed, breath ragged. "They want the server farm in the sub-basement. Everything, my patents, the children's medical trials, the offshore trusts. If they get it, we disappear." Elara's mind raced faster than her feet. She had seen men like these before, only poorer and with rusted machetes instead of suppressed rifles. Men who took what villages could not protect. She yanked Victor to a stop outside the nursery. "The children first. Then we burn the servers ourselves." He stared at her for half a heartbeat, something fierce and admiring flaring in his eyes, then nodded. They burst into the nursery where the nanny, pale and trembling, had already herded the five into the walk-in panic room disguised as a wardrobe. Sophia was trying to look brave, but her hands shook as she clutched Mia. Liam had a fireplace poker. The twins were unnaturally quiet. Victor knelt, voice steady despite the chaos. Code word is constellation. "You lock this door from the inside. No one else knows the sequence but me and Elara. You do not open for anyone else, understand?" He kissed each forehead with the urgency of a man who might never get another chance. Elara crouched in front of Sophia. "You are the oldest. Keep them singing. They'll stay calmer if they hear your voice." She pressed the ancient dagger into Sophia's hand. "This has kept me alive across deserts. It will keep you safe tonight." The teenager's lip trembled, but she closed her fingers around the hilt. "Come back." "We will," Elara promised, and pray it was not a lie. The door sealed with a hiss of hydraulics. Victor was already moving, pulling Elara toward the service elevator that dropped straight to the sub-basement. As they descended, he tapped his watch. The mansion's AI responded in a calm female voice, initiating Protocol Obsidian. flooding coolant lines. Magnetic purge in 4 minutes. You're going to fry your own servers? Elara asked. Better molten silicon than in their hands. The children's gene therapy data alone is worth billions on the black market. Some of them aren't legally mine yet. If that data leaks, child services tears my family apart. The elevator door slid open onto a freezing corridor lined with humming black racks. Coolant mist already hissed from overhead vents. 2 technicians lay unconscious. Victor's loyalists darted before they could trigger the failsafe. The intruders had been thorough. Victor sprinted to the master console, fingers flying across holographic keys. Elara scanned the darkness beyond the server aisles. A red that danced across the far wall, then settled on Victor's spine. She moved without thinking. Years of hauling water buckets up steep village paths had made her strong. Terror made her faster. She tackled Victor sideways as the suppressed shot coughed. The bullet grazed Victor's shoulder, spinning him into the console. Elara rolled, came up with a loose fiber optic cable, and whipped it like a lash across the shooter's visor. Glass cracked. The man staggered. She followed with knee to the throat, the way the old shepherd women had taught her to drop a rampaging goat. The intruder dropped. Victor, blood soaking his shirt, slammed the final sequence. Purge in 90 seconds. More shadows detached from a coolant fog. Elara grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed blinding CO2 into their faces, buying Victor the last seconds he needed. The servers began to scream, high-pitched whine of overheating chips committing suicide. Victor seized her hand. Stairs, now! They burst onto the ground floor into pandemonium. Security forces had retaken the grand foyer, but bodies lay scattered, friend and foe alike. Victor's captain, a scarred ex-Mossad woman named Rivka, tossed him a pistol. East wing's clear. They're trying to extract through the helipad. We have 3 minutes before police drones arrive, and this becomes a diplomatic incident. Victor looked at Elara, eyes wild. The children are still in the panic room? Safe, Rivka confirmed. But the broker is here. Personally. He's on the roof demanding you. Elara felt ice flood her veins. The broker, the man who had taken her from her parents' porch like livestock, was here to finish the transaction he'd started. She looked at the blood on Victor's sleeve, at the dagger now in Sophia's small hand upstairs, and felt something ancient and furious uncoil inside her chest. Take me to him, she said. Victor started to protest, but the look on her face silenced him. He had bought a Barren village girl. He had inherited a storm. They climbed the marble staircase littered with shattered crystal. Moonlight poured through the shattered skylight, turning the scene surreal. On the roof, the broker waited beside a sleek black helicopter, its rotors already turning. He was thinner than she remembered, dressed now in a tailored suit instead of dusty robes, but the predatory smile was unchanged. Elara, he called, voice oily with false warmth. Still causing trouble, I see. Your parents send their regards. They're quite comfortable now, thanks to my generosity. She stepped forward, Victor's hand tight around her arm, as if afraid she might vanish. You traffic in lies as easily as flesh, she said in the old tongue of Eldoria, the one he'd used when he bound her wrists. His smirk faltered. Few buyers ever learn the dialects. Victor raised a pistol. It's over. Police are 2 minutes out. The broker lifted a small remote. One press, and the panic room vent siren. Your choice, Hawthorne. Elara's heart stopped. She glanced at Victor. He hadn't known. The broker had planned for every contingency. But Elara had grown up watching goats test fences for weak spots. She tilted her head, letting tears well. Performance of the broken girl he expected. Please, she whispered, taking a trembling step forward. Don't hurt them. I'll go with you willingly. Just let the children live. The broker's greed overrode caution. He lowered the remote a fraction, reaching for her with his other hand. The moment his fingers brushed her sleeve, Elara moved. She caught his wrist, twisted the way the village wrestlers had taught her on festival nights, and slammed her forehead into his nose. Cartilage crunched. The remote flew. Victor Dove caught it midair and crushed it beneath his heel. The broker roared. pulling a curved blade, but Rivka's sniper round took him in the shoulder from the adjacent rooftop, spinning him into the helicopter's skid. Elara kicked the knife away, planted her foot on his chest, and looked down with all the weight of every woman he had ever sold. "For every girl you stole, may the mountains remember," she said, and shoved him backward into the rotor wash. The downdraft caught him like a rag doll. He tumbled over the edge into the dark, a scream swallowed by the night. Police floodlights swept the roof as drones buzzed overhead. Victor pulled Elara against him, both of them shaking with adrenaline and something deeper. Blood from his shoulders soaked her dress, but she didn't care. Below, the estate burned in controlled patches where Rivka's team was torching anything the intruders might have touched. They found the children emerging from the panic room. Sophia still clutching the dagger, Mia reaching for Elara with both chubby arms. Elara dropped to her knees and gathered them all, 5 small storms of limbs and tears and fierce hugs, while Victor stood guard, pistol dangling forgotten at his side, eyes only for the family he had almost lost. Later, when the police had gone and the estate smoldered quietly under dawn's first blush, Victor found Elara in the greenhouse among the lemon trees his wife had planted years ago. She was barefoot, dirt under her nails, planting new seedlings as if the night had been nothing more than bad weather. He touched the bandage on his shoulder. "Doctors say, I'll live, thanks to you." She didn't look up. "You're welcome." Silence stretched, full of citrus scent and birdsong. Finally he said, voice rough, "I tore up the contract, the one I made you sign. You're free. You can go anywhere. I'll give you enough money to—" Elara pressed a seedling into the soil, patted it gently. "And leave my children?" Victor's breath caught. "You're—" She met his eyes at last, fierce and soft all at once. "The gods did not make me barren, Victor Hawthorne. Men did. You gave me 5 hearts to tend, and I intend to see them bloom. If you'll have me—" He sank to his knees in the dirt beside her, heedless of $1,000 trousers, and rested his forehead against hers. "I have been the loneliest man on earth," he whispered. "Stay. Marry me, not as payment, as choice." Elara smiled, the first unguarded smile he had ever seen from her, radiant as sunrise over her lost mountains. She kissed him, slow, deliberate, tasting of lemon leaves and gunpowder and future. But even as their lips met, a new alert chimed from Victor's watch. Rivka's voice tense. "Sir, we just intercepted chatter. The broker's organization has a dead man switch. In 72 hours, every buyer he ever serviced receives a file with Elara's original contract, her village's location, and the children's medical data. They're calling it the Barren Bride auction. They want to finish what he started." Victor's arms tightened around her. Elara pulled back just far enough to show him the fire still burning in her eyes. "Then we have 72 hours, she said, to burn their entire world to the ground before they stand on." She stood, brushed soil from her hands, and started toward the house where 5 children waited for breakfast and a lifetime of stories yet untold. Victor watched her go, heart hammering with terror and love in equal measure, then followed. Because the woman he had bought for convenience had become the general he would follow into hell itself. And somewhere far below the estate, in a hidden vault that even the purge had not touched, a single server blinked to life, its screen illuminating an encrypted file labeled simply, "Elara, Phase 2. The war began at sunrise, not with armies, but with whispers across dark fiber, with forward credentials slipping into Swiss banks at 3 a.m. Zurich time, with cargo manifests rerouting in Singapore, shell companies dissolving like sugar in rain. Elara and Victor had 72 hours to erase her from every ledger the broker had ever touched, and they spent the first 6 just learning how vast his empire truly was. Rivka turned the East Wing into a command center. Screens glowed with faces of women the broker had sold over 20 years, some now grandmothers, some long dead, all ghosts watching Elara with silent expectation. Sophia, still clutching the ancient dagger, sat beside hackers twice her age and translated old village dialects hidden in the broker's coded ledgers. Liam rewrote routing protocols, while the twins brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Even little Mia colored threat maps with crayons, marking safe houses in bright yellow, because yellow means hope, right? Elara walked among them barefoot, hair braided tight like armor, speaking softly. She did not give orders. She gave memories. She told them what it felt like to be priced by the kilo, to have your future weighed against a sack of grain. And every survivor on those screens, every sister stolen, leaned closer and answered, "We are ready." On the second day, Victor flew to Vienna under a dead man's passport and walked into the private bank that had laundered the broker's blood money for decades. He carried nothing but a single USB drive and the exhausted fury of a father who had almost lost everything. By nightfall, the bank's chairman was on his knees in a marble hallway, signing over the master keys, while Victor's voice never rose above a murmur. "You kept children in cages with my money. Tonight the cage is open, where you never leave this building." The third day belonged to Elara. She returned to Eldoria alone, in a plane will cloak the color of dust, the same cloak her mother had wrapped her in the night they sold her. The village had not changed. The same crooked olive trees, the same cracked bell in the square, the same elders smoking on the same stone benches. They saw her step off the bus and laughed behind their hands. The Barren girl come home to beg, they thought. She walked straight to the house where she was born. Her parents opened the door, older now, thinner, eyes darting like corner rats. Before they could speak, Elara placed a small wooden box on the threshold. Inside lay every coin they had taken for her, polished bright, and on top a single photograph. The 5 children asleep in a pile on Victor's library rug, Mia's head on Elara's lap, Victor's hand resting protectively over them all. Her mother reached for the money with greedy fingers. Elara closed the lid. "That gold bought silence once," she said quietly. "Today it buys truth." By dusk the entire village was gathered in the square. Elara stood on the well, where girls once drew water and told them, in the old mountain tongue only women spoke, exactly what had been done in their name. She named every elder who had taken percentage, every father who had looked away. Phones hidden in the crowd live-streamed to a private server. Within minutes, the feed reached every woman the broker had ever sold. They watched their own village betray them again, and this time they answered. That night, fire started not of homes, but of records. Ledgers burned in metal drums, while grandmothers sang the morning songs that turned into war cries. The men who had profited fled into the mountains with nothing but the clothes on their backs. By morning, Eldoria belonged to its daughters again. At the 71st hour, the dead man switch activated. Across the dark web, invitations went out for the Barren Bride auction. Highest bidder to receive the untouched village girl and the billionaire's secrets. Thousands logged in, predators sending one last feast. They found only fire. Every link led to the same live feed. Elara standing in the ruins of the broker's flagship server farm in Moldova, wind whipping her cloak, hair unbound, eyes blazing like obsidian struck by lightning. Behind her, women from 30 countries poured gasoline over racks that had stored their pain. Sophia pressed the detonator with steady 15-year-old hands. The explosion was silent at first, then a roar that shook the Carpathians. Elara spoke only once. Voice carried to every corner of the underworld. "I was never barren. I was a seed buried in ash. Watch me grow." The feed cut to black. The broker's empire died with it. No backups, no recovery, no second chances. Billions vanished. Traffickers woke to empty accounts. Private jets grounded for lack of fuel. In hidden rooms around the world, men who thought themselves untouchable stared at blank screens and felt, for the first time, what was to be powerless. 6 months later, a new village rose on the slopes above old Eldoria. Stone houses with solar roofs, a school where girls studied code beside ancient songs, an infirmary funded by the Hawthorne Foundation. At its heart stood a garden after garden, lemon trees and jasmine climbing white walls, because Elara had decided the world would never again smell only of fear. On the first day of spring, Victor and Elara were married under those trees. No white dress, no veil. Just wildflowers woven into her hair and 5 children in bare feet, scattering petals like reckless stars. Sophia carried the ancient dagger, now piece-tied with ribbon. Mia rode on Victor's shoulders, waving a flag she had drawn herself. A mountain, a city, and 7 stick figures holding hands. When the elder woman, one of the rescued, asked Elara to speak her vow, she took Victor's hands and said simply, "I choose you. I choose them. I choose us, every day, louder than any chain ever forged. Victor's reply was barely a whisper, but the microphones caught it for the world. You were the miracle I stopped believing in. Thank you for making me a believer again. They kissed while the children cheered and petals rained, and somewhere far away, across oceans and borders, women who had once been merchandise lifted their faces to the same sun and smiled for the first time in years. Years later, travelers passing through mountains would sometimes meet a woman with midnight hair and eyes like polished obsidian eyes, walking with a tall man whose hand never left the small of her back, trailed by 5 grown storms of laughter, and 2 more small ones they had made together the old-fashioned way, slow, deliberate, miraculous. And if you asked the villagers who she was, they would smile with fierce pride and tell you, that is Elara of the unbroken seed. She was sold for Barren. She bought the world back with fire and love. And every spring, the mountains bloomed brighter because she passed this way. And the story would never end, because every child she taught, every woman she freed, every garden she planted carried her forward, like roots cracking stone, like rivers carving canyons, like a single heart that refused to stay buried. The barren girl became the mother of nations, and the lonely billionaire found the only wealth that matters, a hand to hold when the night is long, and a promise louder than gold. We are not for sale. We are eternal.